The crystal chandeliers of the Hawthorne mansion dripped with light, illuminating a scene of opulent revelry. It was the party of the year, a dazzling affair, hosted by the city's golden couple, Ethan and Olivia Ashwood. But as the champagne flowed and the orchestra played, a dark secret was about to shatter the glittering facade. While Ethan, the charismatic heir to a billion-dollar empire, held his stunning mistress, Sophia, in a passionate embrace on the dance floor, he was oblivious to the storm gathering at his door. His pregnant wife, Olivia, wasn't at home resting as he believed. She was pulling up to the grand entrance, not with tears in her eyes, but with a document in her hand that would bring his world crashing down. The Hawthorne mansion wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Perched atop a hill overlooking the sprawling city, its white columns and manicured gardens whispered of old money and untouchable power. Tonight it was a kaleidoscope of flashing diamonds, rustling silks, and the low hum of influential conversations. This was Ethan Ashwood's 30th birthday party, and it was less a celebration of him than a testament to his family's legacy. Ethan moved through the crowd with the easy grace of a man born into privilege. His smile was a carefully calibrated weapon, disarming business rivals and charming the wives of his investors. He was a portrait of success, a bespoke tuxedo clinging to his athletic frame, a watch worth more than a suburban home on his wrist, and an air of effortless command. He was the king of this castle, and everyone in attendance was a courtier. "Ethan, darling, you've outdone yourself," cooed Mrs. Vanderbilt, a woman whose face was a testament to the marvels of modern cosmetic surgery. "Anything for my friends, Patricia," he replied, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. His eyes, however, darted over her shoulder, scanning the room. He was looking for someone. His wife, Olivia, was conspicuously absent. The official story, the one he'd personally curated and disseminated, was that she was in the delicate stages of her first pregnancy and needed her rest. It was a plausible lie, one that garnered him sympathetic nods and knowing smiles. "Such a devoted husband," they would say. The truth was far more complicated. The truth was currently making her way across the marble dance floor, her red dress a slash of defiance against the muted tones of the other guests. Sophia Reyes was a vision of fiery beauty, her dark hair cascading down her back, her laughter a melody that seemed to pull Ethan towards her like a siren's call. She wasn't just his mistress. She was his addiction, the exhilarating escape from the gilded cage his life had become. Their affair had started 6 months ago, a clandestine spark in a dreary boardroom that had quickly erupted into a conflagration. With Sophia, Ethan wasn't the Ashwood heir, burdened by expectations and a lineage that stretched back to the Mayflower. He was just a man alive and desired. She saw him not his bank account, or so he told himself. He intercepted her near the French doors that led to the terrace. The orchestra swelled, providing the perfect cover. "You're late," he murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. "I had to make an entrance, didn't I?" Sophia's voice was a low purr. "I couldn't let your wife have all the attention even in absentia." A flicker of unease crossed Ethan's face at the mention of Olivia. "Let's not talk about her tonight." "Fine by me," Sophia said, her fingers tracing the lapel of his tuxedo. "In fact, let's not talk at all." She pulled him onto the dance floor, her body molding against his. They moved as one, a symphony of illicit desire. The other guests, a mixture of the oblivious and the politely unseeing, gave them a wide berth. In their world, discretion was the highest virtue. As long as the facade remained intact, the sins committed behind it were of little consequence. Ethan spun her around, his heart pounding a rhythm that had nothing to do with the music. He felt an intoxicating cocktail of guilt and euphoria. He knew he was playing with fire, that the fragile peace of his marriage was hanging by a thread. But in Sophia's arms, the consequences felt a world away. He thought of Olivia, his sweet, unsuspecting Olivia. He had met her in college, a scholarship student with a brilliant mind and a kind heart that had been a balm to his jaded soul. She was the perfect partner, the ideal Mrs. Ashwood. She was intelligent, poised, and came from a respectable, if not wealthy, background. Marrying her had been the smartest decision he'd ever made, both for his heart and for his public image. Their life together was a carefully constructed masterpiece of domestic bliss, the kind that graced the covers of society magazines. The pregnancy was the final perfect touch. An heir to the Ashwood dynasty was on the way, but perfection, he had discovered, could be suffocating. Olivia's quiet strength, which he had once admired, now felt like a silent judgment. Her unwavering goodness was a mirror that reflected his own growing list of transgressions. Sophia was the antithesis of all that. She was chaos and passion, a thrilling detour from the straight and narrow path his life was supposed to follow. "What are you thinking about?" Sophia whispered, her lips brushing against his ear. "Nothing." He lied, pulling her closer, inhaling the scent of her perfume, a heady mix of jasmine and something wild and untamable. He was so lost in the moment, so consumed by the heat of her touch, that he didn't see the sleek black car that had just pulled up to the mansion's grand entrance. He didn't see the doorman. His face a mask of confusion opened the door, and he certainly didn't see his pregnant wife, Olivia, step out of the car, her face not etched with the tears of a betrayed woman, but set with a steely resolve that would have sent a chill down his spine had he seen it. In her hand, she clutched a large manila envelope. It wasn't a weapon of emotional warfare. It was a declaration of independence. It was the deed to the Hawthorne mansion, and it was in her name. Olivia stood for a moment at the foot of the grand staircase, taking in the scene before her. The pulsating heart of the party was the ballroom, and from where she stood, she had a clear view of the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz, a classic romantic tune that felt like a bitter mockery. And there in the center of it all were Ethan and Sophia. They were a striking couple, she had to admit. Sophia's red dress was a vibrant flame against the dark canvas of Ethan's tuxedo. They moved with a practiced intimacy, his hand resting possessively on her back, their faces close, their whispered words lost in the music. A wave of nausea so much stronger than the morning sickness she had been battling for weeks washed over her. But she pushed it down, converting the pain into a cold, hard knot of determination in her stomach. The Olivia that Ethan knew, the one he had left at home with a patronizing pat on the head and instructions to rest up, would have dissolved into a puddle of tears at this sight. She would have fled heartbroken and humiliated. But the woman standing in the foyer of the Hawthorne mansion tonight was a stranger to him, a woman forged in the fires of a slow-burning betrayal. Her journey to this moment hadn't been a sudden sprint of rage, but a marathon of dawning horror. It had started with the late-night meetings, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the way he had started to guard his phone like it contained state secrets. At first, she had made excuses for him, the pressure of the company, the stress of the upcoming merger. She had been the dutiful, understanding wife. The confirmation had come in the most mundane of ways. A credit card statement accidentally left on his desk, detailing lavish gifts. She had never received romantic dinners at restaurants he had never taken her to. The name on the receipts, S. Reyes, had been a gut punch. A quick, soul-crushing search on social media had revealed the face of her husband's lover. Sophia Reyes, a socialite and aspiring actress with a reputation for attaching herself to powerful men. The discovery had shattered her world, but it had not broken her. After the initial tidal wave of grief had receded, something else had taken its place, a chilling clarity. She saw her marriage for what it was. A business transaction, a carefully orchestrated illusion of which she was the primary unwitting prop. Ethan hadn't just cheated on her, he had underestimated her. And that was a mistake he was about to regret. She had spent the last month in a whirlwind of secret meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and private investigators. She had unearthed the tangled web of Ethan's finances, the offshore accounts, the shell corporations. But the real prize, the one that would give her the ultimate leverage, had been the mansion itself. Her father-in-law, the formidable patriarch of the Ashwood clan, had given them the Hawthorne mansion as a wedding gift. But the old man, a shrewd and cynical operator who trusted no one, had put the deed solely in Olivia's name. It was a preemptive strike, a way to ensure that if his son's notoriously fickle affections ever strayed, the family's most valuable asset would be protected. At the time, Olivia had been touched by the gesture, seeing it as a sign of his faith in her. Now she understood it for what it was, a weapon bequeathed to her by a man who knew his own son all too well. With the manila envelope clutched in her hand like a shield, she began her ascent up the grand staircase. She ignored the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed in her wake. Her focus was singular, her target locked. As she reached the top of the stairs, the music came to a close. The dancers applauded, their laughter and chatter filling the momentary silence. Ethan and Sophia were still standing in the center of the dance floor, flushed and breathless. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and Sophia's answering laugh was loud and triumphant. That was the moment Olivia chose to make her presence known. "Ethan," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the din of the party like a shard of ice. Ethan froze. The sound of his wife's voice in this place at this moment was so unexpected, so utterly impossible, that for a second he thought he had imagined it. He turned slowly, a disbelieving frown creasing his handsome features. And then he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the dance floor, a vision in a simple but elegant white dress that did little to conceal the gentle swell of her pregnancy. Her face was pale, but her eyes were blazing with a fire he had never seen before. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. This was no longer a party. It was a spectacle. Sophia, clinging to Ethan's arm, looked from him to Olivia, a smirk playing on her lips. She seemed to relish the drama, the public confrontation. She had won, and she wanted everyone to know it. "Well, well," Sophia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look what the cat dragged in. I thought you were supposed to be at home, resting." Olivia's gaze didn't waver from Ethan's face. "I was," she said, her voice calm and even. "But I had some business to attend to." Ethan finally found his voice, though it was hoarse and unsteady. "Olivia, what are you doing here? You should be in bed." "I've been in bed for a long time, Ethan," she replied, her words heavy with a meaning that was lost on the onlookers, but that hit him with the force of a physical blow. "I've been asleep, but now I'm wide awake." She took a step forward, and another, until she was standing directly in front of them. The orchestra, sensing the seismic shift in the atmosphere, had fallen silent. The only sound was the frantic beating of Ethan's heart in his own ears. "What is this, Olivia?" he demanded, trying to inject a note of authority into his voice to regain control of the situation. "What's in the envelope?" Olivia's lips curved into a small, sad smile. "It's a gift," she said, "for your 30th birthday." She extended the manila envelope to him. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting from her face to Sophia's, to the sea of curious faces surrounding them. He felt trapped, exposed like an animal caught in the headlights. With a trembling hand, he took the envelope. He tore it open, his movements clumsy and rushed. He pulled out the sheaf of papers inside, and his eyes scanned the first page. He saw the official letterhead, the legal jargon, the familiar address of the Hawthorne mansion, and then he saw the name printed in bold, undeniable, black ink, Olivia Ashwood. Sole proprietor. The color drained from his face. The ballroom with its glittering chandeliers and elegantly dressed guests seemed to tilt on its axis. He looked up at Olivia, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. "Happy birthday, darling," Olivia said, her voice soft but laced with steel. "Now get your whore out of my house." The silence that followed Olivia's words was so profound, it was as if a vacuum had sucked all the air out of the room. The guests stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock scandal and a kind of horrified glee. They had come for a party, but they were being treated to a public execution. Sophia was the first to react. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of indignant fury. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm the woman whose name is on the deed to this house," Olivia replied, her voice unwavering, "which is more than I can say for you. You're just a temporary distraction, and your time is up." She turned her gaze back to Ethan, who was still staring at the papers in his hand, as if they were a venomous snake. "I said get her out." Ethan, for the first time in his life, was utterly speechless. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and he had no idea how to stop it. He looked at Sophia, her face contorted with rage, and then at Olivia, her expression a cold, unreadable mask. He was trapped between the woman he desired and the woman who held all the power. "Ethan, are you going to let her speak to me like that?" Sophia demanded, grabbing his arm. He flinched at her touch. The spell was broken. The intoxicating allure that had surrounded Sophia just moments before had evaporated, leaving behind something cheap and desperate. He saw her now through the eyes of the crowd, through the eyes of his wife. He saw a liability, a mistake, a catastrophic error in judgment. "Sophia, I think you should go," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What?" Her jaw dropped. "You're taking her side." "Just go," he repeated more forcefully this time, pulling his arm from her grasp. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. Then, with a guttural cry of fury, she turned and stormed away, pushing her way through the stunned crowd. The red dress, which had seemed so glamorous just minutes before, now looked like a flag of defeat. The guests, sensing that the main event was over, began to disperse their whispers following Sophia out of the ballroom. They had their story, the scandal that would be the talk of the city for weeks to come. Ethan and Olivia were left alone in the center of the vast empty dance floor. The orchestra had packed up and gone. The caterers were discreetly clearing away the remnants of the party. The silence was deafening. "Olivia," Ethan began, his voice pleading, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, turning to walk away. "Please," he said, reaching for her arm. "Don't do this." She stopped, but she didn't turn to face him. Do what, Ethan? Stand up for myself. Refuse to be your doormat. Forgive me if I'm a little new to this. I've been playing the part of the perfect, oblivious wife for so long, I almost forgot who I really was. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time he sounded like he meant it. I messed up. I know I did. But we can fix this. We have a child on the way. At the mention of their baby, a flicker of pain crossed Olivia's face. It was the one chink in her armor, the one vulnerability she couldn't completely conceal. Don't you dare use our child as a bargaining chip, she said, her voice trembling with a rage that was far more potent than Sophia's theatrical outburst. You lost the right to do that when you decided to start a second family with her. That's not what she is, he insisted. She meant nothing. Olivia finally turned to face him, her eyes filled with a weary sadness. She meant enough for you to humiliate me in front of our friends and family. She meant enough for you to risk everything we've built. She meant enough for you to break my heart. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I want you out of the house, Ethan. I'll have your things packed and sent to a hotel. My lawyer will be in touch with yours on Monday morning. Olivia, you can't be serious, he said, his voice laced with panic. My father, the company, my reputation. You should have thought about your reputation before you decided to have an affair, she said, her voice devoid of sympathy. As for your father, I have a feeling he'll be more understanding than you think. She turned and walked away, her back straight, her head held high. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had won. Ethan stood alone in the wreckage of his party, the deed to the mansion still clutched in his hand. He had never felt so powerless, so completely and utterly defeated. The king had been dethroned not by a rival or an enemy, but by the one person he had taken for granted. The next few days passed in a blur of damage control and public humiliation. The story of the party was everywhere, splashed across the gossip columns and whispered about in the boardrooms and country clubs of the city's elite. Ethan became a pariah, a cautionary tale. His father, as Olivia had predicted, was surprisingly pragmatic about the situation. He was furious, not at the infidelity, but at the public nature of the scandal. You've brought shame on this family, he had thundered over the phone. But the damage is done. Now we have to contain it. He had summoned Olivia to his office, a stark, intimidating space on the top floor of the Ashwood Tower. She had gone not as a supplicant, but as an equal. I assume you're here to talk about the divorce, she said, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. The old man regarded her with a new respect. He had always seen her as a pretty pliable accessory for his son. He was beginning to see the steel beneath the silk. There will be no divorce, he said, his voice firm. Not now, not with a baby on the way. The press would have a field day. The company's stock would plummet. That's not my problem, Olivia said calmly. It will be, he replied. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. He slid a folder across the polished mahogany desk. Olivia opened it. Inside was a proposal, a contract of sorts. It offered her a significant stake in the company, a seat on the board, and complete financial independence. In return, she would have to maintain the public appearance of her marriage to Ethan until after the baby was born, and the scandal had died down. You want me to continue to live a lie? She asked, her voice incredulous. I want you to be smart, he said. Ethan has been a fool. He has been punished. But the Ashwood name, the Ashwood legacy is bigger than both of you. This is not about forgiveness, Olivia. It's about power. I'm offering you a seat at the table, a real one, not as Ethan's wife, but as a partner. Olivia looked at the papers in her hand, and then at the old man's hard, shrewd face. She thought of the baby growing inside her, a child who would be born into this world of power and privilege, a world she now had the opportunity to shape. She thought of the woman she had been, the woman who had been so easily dismissed and discarded. And she thought of the woman she was becoming, a woman who would never be underestimated again. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a queen who had just checkmated a king. "All right, Mr. Ashwood," she said, extending her hand. "You have a deal." They shook on it, two unlikely allies, bound together by a common interest, the preservation of an empire. The war was far from over, but a new powerful alliance had just been forged, and Olivia Ashwood, the scorned wife, was now a player in a game she had never intended to play. But she was a quick learner, and she was determined to win. The Hawthorne mansion, once a symbol of her picture-perfect marriage, now felt like a mausoleum. The silence was a constant, oppressive presence, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer and the hushed footsteps of the staff, who now looked at her with a mixture of pity and awe. Olivia had won the battle, but the victory felt hollow. Ethan was gone, banished to a luxury hotel suite that felt more like a prison. He called her daily, his voice a pathetic cocktail of remorse and desperation. She let the calls go to voicemail, listening to his rambling apologies with a detached coldness that surprised even herself. The love she had once felt for him had curdled into a bitter resentment. Her new life was a strange paradox. By day, she was the ascendant power player, a woman finding her footing in the cutthroat world of corporate finance. She spent her hours in the Ashwood Tower, a sleek modern fortress of glass and steel that was a world away from the chintz and comfort of her former life. She was a quick study, devouring reports, asking intelligent questions in board meetings, and earning the grudging respect of the company's old guard, who had initially dismissed her as a pretty face. Her father-in-law, a man she had once feared, became her unlikely mentor. He saw in her a ruthlessness and ambition that mirrored his own, a quality he had always found lacking in his son. He taught her the intricate dance of power, the art of the deal, the importance of projecting an aura of unshakable confidence. But by night, when she returned to the cavernous, empty mansion, the facade would crumble. The silence would close in, and she would be left alone with her thoughts, with the ghost of the life she had lost, and the uncertain future of the child she was carrying. The baby was a constant physical reminder of Ethan, of his betrayal. Some days she would cradle her growing belly and whisper promises of a better life, a life free from the suffocating expectations of the Ashwood dynasty. On other days, she would feel a surge of anger, a resentment towards this innocent, unborn child who tied her to a man she now despised. The truce she had forged with her father-in-law was a fragile one, a marriage of convenience built on a shared desire for control. They were allies, but not friends. There was a constant unspoken tension between them, a sense of two predators circling each other, waiting for the other to show a sign of weakness. Ethan, meanwhile, was spiraling, cut off from the company, ostracized from his social circle and denied access to his wife and his home. He was a man adrift. He spent his days in a haze of alcohol and self-pity, his nights haunted by the memory of Olivia's face at the party, her eyes like chips of ice. He tried to contact Sophia, but she had vanished. Her phone number was disconnected, her social media accounts deleted. He heard whispers that she had left the country, that she had been paid off by his father to disappear. The thought that his passionate, all-consuming affair could be reduced to a simple financial transaction was a new and particularly bitter kind of humiliation. He was a king without a kingdom, a man stripped of his power, his purpose, and his identity. He had always been Ethan Ashwood, the heir apparent. Now he was just Ethan, and he had no idea who that was. One evening, driven by a desperate need to see Olivia, to plead his case one more time, he showed up at the mansion unannounced. He found her in the garden, sitting on a stone bench, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. She looked serene, beautiful, and utterly untouchable. "Olivia," he said, his voice hoarse. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Ethan? You're not supposed to be here." "I had to see you," he said, taking a step closer. "I can't live like this. I need you. I need our family." "You destroyed our family," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I can fix it," he insisted. "I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut ties with everyone you don't trust. I'll be the husband you deserve." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the genuine remorse. A part of her, the old Olivia, the woman who had loved him so fiercely, wanted to believe him. But the new Olivia, the woman who had been forged in the crucible of his betrayal, knew better. "It's too late, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but final. "You didn't just break my heart, you broke my trust, and that's something that can never be fixed." She stood up and walked back towards the house, leaving him alone in the twilight. He watched her go, a sense of utter finality washing over him. He had lost her. He had lost everything. As Olivia entered the house, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her father-in-law. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be prepared to discuss the new marketing strategy." She took a deep breath, pushing aside the lingering image of Ethan's heartbroken face. She had a new life now, a new purpose. She was no longer just a wife, a mother-to-be. She was a businesswoman, a power player, a force to be reckoned with. She was Olivia Ashwood, and she was just getting started. The war for the Ashwood Empire had just begun, and the lines were being drawn. On one side was the old guard, the patriarch, and his newfound protégé. On the other was the disgraced heir, a man with nothing left to lose and a burning desire for revenge. And in the middle was an unborn child, the ultimate prize, in a game where there could be no winners, only survivors. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The Hawthorne Mansion became Olivia's fortress, and the Ashwood Tower her battlefield. She thrived in the high-stakes environment, her mind sharp, her instincts honed. She was no longer playing a part. She had become the role. Her father-in-law, whom she now called by his first name, Arthur, treated her with a gruff respect that bordered on admiration. He saw the iron in her soul and recognized a kindred spirit. He pushed her, challenged her, and in doing so forged her into a formidable businesswoman. Ethan, however, was not one to be so easily cast aside. Fueled by a potent cocktail of resentment and a desperate need to reclaim his birthright, he began to plot his comeback. He started by mending fences with the board members his father had alienated over the years, using his charm and his promises of a more modern, less autocratic leadership to win them over. He also started digging into the company's finances, looking for any sign of weakness, any mistake that he could exploit. And he found one. A series of risky off-the-books investments that Arthur had made years ago, a gamble that had paid off handsomely, but had left the company vulnerable. The confrontation came at the annual shareholders' meeting. It was held in a cavernous ballroom at a downtown hotel, the air thick with tension and the scent of money. Olivia, now heavily pregnant, sat beside Arthur at the head table, a picture of calm, confident power. Ethan, looking haggard but determined, took the stage to make an unscheduled address. He laid out his father's financial indiscretions with a cold, calculated precision, painting a picture of a reckless, out-of-touch leader who had put the entire Ashwood empire at risk. The room erupted in a chorus of concerned murmurs. The board members exchanged anxious glances. Arthur's face was a thunderous mask of fury. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, rising to his feet. "A desperate, pathetic attempt by a disgraced son to seize power. Is it?" Ethan countered, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Or is it the truth? A truth you've been hiding for years, a truth that could have destroyed this company." He turned his attention to the shareholders, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. "I am not asking you to forgive my personal failings. I am asking you to save this company from a man who is no longer fit to lead it. I am asking you to choose a new path, a new future for Ashwood Industries." He had them. Olivia could see it in their faces. They were swayed by his confidence, by his promises of transparency, and a new era of leadership. She felt a grudging admiration for his audacity, for the sheer, unmitigated gall of his power play. But she had not come this far to be undone by her sentimental, philandering husband. While Ethan had been plotting his coup, she had been preparing for war. She rose to her feet, her pregnant belly a symbol not of vulnerability, but of the future of the continuation of the Ashwood dynasty. "My husband is right," she said, her voice clear and strong, silencing the murmurs in the room. A look of triumph flashed across Ethan's face. Arthur stared at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and betrayal. "He's right that there have been secrets." She continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "He's right that there have been mistakes, but he has not told you the whole story." She paused, letting the tension build. "What my husband has failed to mention is that these risky investments he speaks of were not just a gamble. They were a lifeline. They were the very thing that saved this company from bankruptcy during the last recession, a fact that is conveniently omitted from the documents he has presented to you today. She had the company's real financial records, the ones that told the whole story, projected onto a large screen behind her. The numbers, the charts, the graphs, they all painted a very different picture from the one Ethan had presented. They showed a leader who had taken a calculated risk to save his empire, a gamble that had paid off in spades. "My father-in-law is not a reckless man," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that was impossible to fake. "He is a visionary. He is the reason we are all in this room today, the reason the Ashwood name is synonymous with success and stability." She then turned her attention to Ethan, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "As for my husband, a man who would use his own family's secrets to further his own ambitions, a man who would tear down his own father to build himself up, is that the kind of leader you want for this company? Is that the kind of man you can trust with your future?" The silence that followed was broken by a single, slow clap. It came from one of the oldest, most respected members of the board, and then another joined in, and another, until the entire room was filled with a thunderous applause. Ethan stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. He had been so close. He had tasted victory. And then in a matter of moments, Olivia had snatched it away from him. She had not just defeated him, she had annihilated him. Arthur looked at Olivia. his eyes filled with a pride and respect that he had never shown his own son. He had chosen his heir, and he had chosen well. The vote of confidence in Arthur's leadership was unanimous. Ethan left the ballroom, a broken man, his last desperate gamble, having failed spectacularly. He had lost not just the company, but the respect of his peers, the love of his wife, and the last vestiges of his own self-worth. A few weeks later, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Alexander, a name that meant defender of the people. She stood at the window of her hospital room, looking out at the city skyline, the Ashwood Tower gleaming in the distance. She held her son in her arms, a tiny, perfect bundle of hope and potential. She was no longer just Olivia Ashwood, the wronged wife. She was a mother, a leader, a queen who had fought for her kingdom and won. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But she was ready. She had found a strength she never knew she possessed, a power she had never dared to dream of. And as she looked down at her son's face, she made a silent promise. She would build a new legacy, an empire of her own, on the ashes of the one that had almost destroyed her. The future of the Ashwood dynasty was in her hands, and she would not falter. 5 years passed. The scandal that had rocked the city's elite faded from a blazing headline to a whispered legend, a cautionary tale told at cocktail parties. In its place, a new narrative had taken root, one meticulously crafted by Olivia Ashwood. It was the story of a woman who had not just survived a public humiliation, but had thrived in its aftermath, transforming Ashwood Industries from a stagnant old money behemoth into a dynamic, forward-thinking powerhouse. The Hawthorne Mansion was no longer a mausoleum, but a home filled with the laughter of a bright, inquisitive 5-year-old boy. Alexander was the center of Olivia's universe, a grounding force in her high-powered life. He had his father's charming smile and her own determined eyes. She was raising him to be kind, intelligent, and above all to understand the value of integrity, a quality she felt was sorely lacking in his paternal lineage. She rarely spoke of Ethan, and to Alexander his father was a phantom, a face in a few carefully selected photographs, a man who was away on a long trip. Arthur Ashwood, his health failing, had officially retired, ceding the title of CEO to Olivia. He now spent his days in a quiet wing of the mansion, a frail but still sharp observer, watching with immense pride as the woman he'd once underestimated steered his legacy into the future. The alliance born of crisis had solidified into a genuine, if unconventional, bond of respect. Olivia was the daughter he'd never had, the successor his own son could never be. But the past is never truly buried. It lies in wait, a dormant seed ready to sprout at the first sign of rain. The rain came on a Tuesday morning, not as a storm, but as a quiet, unassuming announcement in the financial pages. A new tech company, Phoenix Innovations, had just secured a massive, game-changing contract with the city's infrastructure project, a contract that Ashwood Industries had been the front-runner to win. The name of Phoenix's founder and CEO sent a jolt through Olivia, a cold shock that felt unnervingly familiar. Ethan. He was back. This wasn't the broken, disgraced man who had fled the shareholders' meeting 5 years ago. The accompanying photograph showed a different person. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by a hardened, steely gaze. He looked leaner, tougher, the soft edges of privilege carved away by years of struggle. The article detailed his incredible comeback story, how he had started with nothing in a small West Coast garage building, an innovative tech firm, from the ground up, fueled by a relentless, almost obsessive drive. He hadn't inherited his new kingdom. He had forged it himself. Olivia felt a dizzying mix of emotions, anger, that he dared to challenge her on her own turf, a grudging flicker of respect for his resilience, and a deep, unsettling fear. She knew Ethan. She knew his ambition. He hadn't come back just to compete with her. He had come back to reclaim what he believed was his. The first shot was fired. The city contract was a major blow, but not a fatal one. The war, however, had just begun. Ethan, using the expertise of Phoenix Innovations, began a systematic campaign against Ashwood Industries. He poached her top engineers with promises of creative freedom and lucrative stock options. He outmaneuvered her on key international deals, using a nimbleness and aggression that the larger, more bureaucratic Ashwood couldn't match. He was a ghost in her machine, anticipating her every move, exploiting every weakness. It felt personal because it was. He wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to prove that he was, and always had been, the smarter, more capable Ashwood. The confrontation she had been dreading and preparing for came at a charity gala, an event she could not avoid. She saw him across the crowded room holding court, his newfound success radiating from him like a magnetic field. He looked up, and their eyes met. The years melted away. For a heart-stopping moment, he was just her, Ethan, the man she had once loved with every fiber of her being. He made his way towards her, the crowd parting for him as it once had, when he was the heir to the Ashwood throne. "Olivia," he said, his voice a low, familiar rumble. It was deeper now, rougher around the edges. "You look incredible." "Cut the pleasantries, Ethan," she replied, her voice colder than she intended. "What do you want?" "To talk," he said simply. "It's been a long time. We have nothing to talk about. You've made your intentions perfectly clear." "Have I?" He raised an eyebrow. "You see this as a war, Olivia. I see it as a negotiation." "A negotiation for what?" "My company. Our company," he corrected her softly. "And our son. I want to see him, Olivia. I want to be his father." The demand hit her with the force of a physical blow. This was his true endgame. It wasn't about the company, not really. It was about Alexander. "You lost the right to be his father 5 years ago," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I made a mistake," he said, his gaze intense, unwavering. "A catastrophic one. And I've spent every day of the last 5 years paying for it. I've built myself back from nothing, Olivia. I did it to prove not to the world, but to myself and to you, that I could be a man worthy of the Ashwood name, worthy of being his father." Before she could respond, a new figure approached them. A woman, elegant and poised in a midnight blue dress, her hand resting possessively on Ethan's arm. It was his new partner, the COO of Phoenix Innovations. But as the woman stepped into the light, Olivia's blood ran cold. It was Sophia. But this was not the grasping, theatrical mistress she had banished from her home. Like Ethan, she was transformed. The fiery petulance was gone, replaced by a cool, calculating intelligence in her eyes. She was a woman of power now, a co-architect of Ethan's new empire. "Olivia," Sophia said, her voice smooth and polished, devoid of its former malice. "It's been a long time. I see you've done well for yourself." The audacity of it, the sheer nerve of them standing there together, a united front, stole Olivia's breath. This wasn't just a business attack or a custody battle. This was a coordinated, deeply personal siege. Ethan looked from Olivia to Sophia, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Sophia is my business partner, Olivia. Nothing more. Is she? Olivia's laugh was sharp and brittle. Forgive me if I have trouble believing anything you say, Ethan. It seems you've rebuilt your new life with the very same woman who helped you destroy your old one. She looked at them, the man who had broken her heart, and the woman who had held the hammer. Now partners in a new venture aimed at dismantling everything she had built. A chilling realization dawned on her. Ethan hadn't just come back for his son, or for the company. He had come back with a secret weapon, a ghost from their shared past. And as Sophia met her gaze, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. Olivia understood that the war was about to enter a new, far more dangerous phase. The battle for the Ashwood legacy was not just about business. It was about to become a war of secrets, and she was terrifyingly certain that Ethan and Sophia knew one she didn't. The drive back to the Hawthorne mansion was a blur. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows, but Olivia saw none of them. She saw only the cool, confident smirk on Sophia's face and the unnerving calm in Ethan's eyes. It was the look of a predator that had its prey cornered. They weren't just attacking her company. They were laying siege to her life, and they had brought a battering ram in the form of a secret she couldn't identify. Upon arriving, she didn't go to her own wing. She went straight to Arthur's. She found him by the fire, a tartan blanket over his frail legs, reading a leather-bound book. He looked up as she entered, his eyes still sharp, immediately sensing her distress. "They're back," Olivia said, her voice tight. "Together." Arthur closed his book, his gnarled fingers resting on the cover. "Ethan and the girl. She's not a girl anymore, Arthur. She's his partner. They run Phoenix Innovations. They took the city contract, and they're threatening to expose something that they believe can destroy us." A shadow passed over the old man's face. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible change, but Olivia, who had spent 5 years studying his every nuance, saw it clearly. It was the flicker of a very old fear. "Nonsense," he rasped, his voice lacking its usual authority. "Desperate tactics from a desperate man. He has nothing." "Are you sure?" Olivia pressed her gaze, boring into him. "Is there any skeleton in the Ashwood closet, Arthur? Anything from the past that could be used against us?" He looked away from her towards the dancing flames. "Every family has its secrets, Olivia. Every empire is built on a foundation that is best left unexamined." His evasiveness was her answer. The threat was real. The next day, Olivia assembled her own war council, her most trusted lawyer, a discreet private investigator with a reputation for unearthing the unearthspiller, and her head of security. The objective was twofold: find out everything about Phoenix Innovations and the last 5 years of Ethan and Sophia's lives, and simultaneously conduct a deep internal audit of Ashwood Industries' entire history, looking for the weapon they intended to use. The investigation into Ethan and Sophia yielded a picture of ruthless ambition. They had been a formidable team, starting in obscurity and clawing their way to the top. They had left a trail of outmaneuvered rivals and hostile takeovers, but there was no hint of a personal relationship beyond their professional one. They were a perfectly calibrated corporate machine. The internal audit was more disquieting. The deeper Olivia's team dug into the origins of Ashwood Industries, the more they found sealed records, missing documents from the early years, and transactions routed through now-defunct banks in countries known for their secrecy. It was a labyrinth of corporate camouflage, and at its center was Arthur. 2 weeks into the investigation, the warning shot arrived. It came not as a threatening letter, but as an anonymous email to the editor of the city's most influential financial journal. The email contained a single scanned document, a 50-year-old shipping manifest for a company that was a precursor to Ashwood Industries. The manifest detailed a cargo of industrial machinery being shipped from a conflict zone in South America. Olivia's investigator, a grizzled ex-intelligence officer named Frank, laid the document on her desk. "The manifest is real," he said, his voice grim. "But the cargo wasn't machinery. My contacts confirm that the company, which was secretly owned by Arthur, was running weapons, not tractors. He made his seed money from a bloody civil war. If this gets out, it won't just be a scandal. It will trigger international laws on war profiteering. The government could freeze every Ashwood asset. The company would be dismantled. You would lose everything." There it was. The secret. A sin so profound, it had the power to erase the Ashwood legacy entirely. The journal, not yet having enough evidence to run the story, sent a query to Ashwood's press office. It was a courtesy, a chance to respond. It was also Ethan's ticking clock. That evening, he called her personal line. She answered. "Did you get my message?" he asked, his voice devoid of triumph, instead holding a note of grim necessity. "You would burn your own family's name to the ground," she asked, her voice a low, furious whisper. "You would do that to your son. Taint his name with war crimes. Our son's name is already tainted." "Olivia," he replied, and for the first time she heard a crack in his composure, a hint of genuine pain. "It was tainted the day I betrayed you. I'm not trying to destroy the Ashwood legacy. I'm trying to save it, to build something new from the ashes of my father's lies, something clean. By blackmailing me, by offering you a choice, a partnership. Merge Phoenix with Ashwood. Create a new entity one with my innovation and your leadership. We run it together. We rebrand, we restructure, we publicly atone for the sins of the past by funding reparations in the region my father exploited. We turn his dirty secret into a story of redemption. We build a true legacy for Alexander. And if I refuse..." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Then I have no choice," Ethan said, his voice heavy with resignation. "The full story with all the supporting evidence goes public. I'll lose the Ashwood name, but Phoenix will survive. I'll be the man who exposed a corrupt dynasty. You and my father will be the ones who go down with the ship. Don't make me do it, Olivia." He hung up. Olivia stood in her office, the city lights glittering below her, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under her. He had her trapped. If she fought him and lost, Alexander would inherit a legacy of shame and a fortune built on blood money. His name would be worthless. If she agreed, she would be chaining herself to the two people she loathed most. She would have to share her throne, her power, her life's work with the man who had shattered her world and the woman who had helped him do it. She would have to look at them across a boardroom table every day, pretending to be partners bound together by a toxic secret. She walked to the window, placing a hand on the cool glass. She had fought so hard, built so much. She had thought she was the queen of this kingdom. Now she realized she was just a custodian of a corrupt empire, and the ghost of its past had returned to demand a price she wasn't sure she could pay. Her choice was stark, controlled demolition or total annihilation, and she had to decide which one she and her son could survive. The story of Olivia Ashwood is a raw, unflinching look at the complexities of love betrayal and the intoxicating allure of power. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is forged in the deepest pain. and that the end of one chapter is often the beginning of a much more compelling one. What started as a tale of a heartbroken wife became the saga of a queen ascending her throne. If Olivia's journey from a victim of deceit to a master of her own destiny resonated with you, if you found yourself cheering for her as she turned the tables on those who wronged her, then please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a story of resilience, and subscribe to the channel for more tales of drama, intrigue, and the indomitable power of the human spirit. What do you think Olivia should do next? Let us know in the comments below.